The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life. The Remarkable People Podcast.
Hello, my friend. Welcome to this week's episode of the Remarkable People Podcast, the Albino Sanchez story. Before we get started, I just wanted to thank God and our sponsors. Today, this episode is always because of God's grace that I can be alive and you can be alive and we can be here together. That's the honest truth. And then for our sponsor, My Pillow. They not only support our show so we can continue to bring you great content, but they give you promo code REMARKABLE where you can get up to 80% off everything you order. And at this time, free shipping on the entire order. So go to mypillow.com/remarkable, get sheets and pillows and mattress covers and slippers, and they even have coffee. So I haven't tried their coffee where I got the subscription, but I use the slippers every day, the mattress pad every day, the 3-inch coil. I use the slippers every day. I use the comforter every day, and I love it. And that's not because they're a sponsor. That's because it's great quality stuff. So now you get My Pillow quality. You get up to 80% off everything. You're supporting American-owned company, and you're supporting our podcast. So thank you. Now, as for today's guest, Albino is going to share his remarkable journey of failing his way to success. He's going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, the highs, the lows, his failures, his successes, his learning points. And he's going to bring us through a journey that we can not only connect with, but learn from and become better humans, not just business professionals, but balanced people. So at this time, get out your pens and paper. You're going to hear from our friend Albino, who is an entrepreneur, a business consultant. He's an author, and he's got a lot going on in his life, and he's got a lot to share. So listen to the entire episode, share it with your family and friends, and most importantly, don't forget to apply what you learn so we can see you at the top. I'm David Pasqualone, and enjoy this episode now, the Albino Sanchez story. Hey, Albino, how are you today, brother?
I'm doing great, David. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's an honor. It's an honor. For our guests, whether they're here for the first episode or they've been with us all 4 years and they're loyal community members, what we're going to do today is go through Albino's life journey, and we're going to talk about his highs, his lows, his in-betweens, and we're not going to just talk about what he was able to achieve or overcome in life, but we're going to stop along the way, reverse engineer how he did it so you and I can too. So Albino, at this time, brother, let's start off in your story. Where were you born? What was your upbringing life? Tell us what started the path for you to make you the man you are today.
Sure. Well, I was born in Mexico City, and I'm the oldest of 3 boys. And well, I had a nice childhood. We were okay financially, and well, but the downside was that my father and my mother were so busy, they were so into their lives that we weren't so close, no? And that affected me in my childhood emotionally, and that's something I've been carrying throughout my life, and I've learned through life and through therapy that those early years are so important in a child's life, and it seemed like everything was great, but a kid needs more communication, more love, more interaction with their parents, etc. And well, I was a pretty much lonely kid, and well, that was my beginning, and so I started growing, and went through a very good school, and I I achieved, the challenge of finishing in that school. My brothers were not able to finish there. They changed a lot of schools. And then at an early age, I started, after in high school, I started working for my dad. And that's where I started, my journey. Actually, the first semester of college, I started working, and this was in a convenience store my father owned. This convenience store is something similar to a 7-Eleven, and that was my first working experience. And well, the store was, it was profitable at the time, but I sensed that, many things could be done to improve, the image, the way they manage the store, etc. I started business administration and finance at school. I loved learning. I read a lot, and I started doing some benchmarking. I watched what other convenience stores were doing, like, for example, 7-Eleven, and in Mexico there's a big chain called Oxxo, and I realized that they have very good controls and a good image and a brand, and so I started, implementing all those practices, and I realized that the current manager was not really cooperating. He didn't agree with all these changes, and he was not really the person I would that would help me to do it. So I had to make some tough decisions, and I had to let him go. And imagine at that young age, doing those kind of things, and you are always, doubting yourself. That's what happened to me at the time. Should I do this? And that manager was, treating me as if I was a spoiled child. No, that his dad gave him this responsibility at such a young age. And I had to overcome that self-doubt, right? And I had to follow my instincts and trust myself. So I did that, and I brought in a new manager, and I changed the inventory system, etc. So I sourced the goods from a warehouse that I drove my car, and I stopped my trunk with goods. So it was fun. It was a lot of work, but I had this passion of, transforming this small organization into a best practice, right? That you could see it, and you could get confused maybe if this part of that other chain, this looks really professional. So that was my inspiration, right, to really professionalize this business. I even invited my wife to help me, and we branded and the business. We created a logo, a name, we painted everything. So it was a great experience. It was like my first experience, especially managing people. I think that was the most difficult part. And well,
And let me ask you a question. When
yeah.
this is going on, a lot of times a father gives his business to his children, allows them to manage it, and they
Mhm.
stay hands-on, or they're almost working against you. Sometimes they're hands-off and they let you make mistakes. What was your father's approach to allowing you to manage his business?
He was totally hands off. He gave me total freedom, and I felt that was a great responsibility, right? He was not really guiding me. He was not really supervising me. So that was huge for me, and I felt hugely responsible. And so I was really, really, you know, being very, very attentive to everything, and I was there as much as I could, juggling school and the business. And I also got some advice from other people. For example, in finance, I reached out to my father-in-law, and he gave me some advice on finance. And then I usually, as I told you before, I benchmarked, and I like to read a lot. So I try to, develop myself and as quickly as possible by reaching out to many sources. and that's the way I started, making changes and improvements to the business. And I presented to him once a month, to my dad, the results of the business. And that's something he was not used to. I wanted to be very professional, and so we went to a hotel and we rented a room, and I presented to him. So I tried to be very, very professional, and it was great. And but at some point the numbers started to look bad, and the reason was that the goods on the shelves started to disappear, and the inventory system was not working correctly, and the provider was not fixing the system. Something weird was happening there. So after some digging, I realized that this new manager was really betraying me. He was really not being honest, and we not just had to fire him, but we had to close the business. So we closed the store. No? So that was my first big experience in business, which was huge for me at the moment. Imagine taking to bankruptcy the dad's business, and fortunately, he had other businesses and he was not depending on this one, but it was big for me. It was a big failure at the moment, but also this gave me a lot of lessons, a lot of learnings, and the biggest lesson was that it's okay to trust people, but you need to supervise. You need to have controls. You need to not just blindfolded trust people. So that was one of my biggest lessons learned.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine. So you're married, but you're still young. You're running a family business. You're doing everything right in the sense of, making improvements and growing and developing. But you, like you said, you blindly trusted the manager and he was abusing that trust, drove you into bankruptcy. So we're going to cover a lot of ground. I have a personal question for you and a business question. We'll start with the business question. So on the business side, like you said, you learned a lot of lessons, and that's going to, I'm sure, come into your story. But for people managing now all over the world, there's different cultures, there's different scales. But for people managing when it comes to relations and trust, what are 2 or 3 tips or, insights you learned from that experience that our listeners should be looking for in their people or relationships, not people?
Sure. Well, I think it's important not just to look for the competence of the people, the person that you hire, not just the background regarding the skills, regarding the knowledge, the experience. You also need to check and be very careful with their values, their attitude, the human side, right? And that's not easy to see in an interview, right? It's not so easy. Many times people can act and people can be very talkative or convincing through their speech. So what I would recommend is, and that's something I've been learning throughout my journey, is that it's a good tool to use an assessment to give you a broader, a more detailed picture of the person, and also to ask some questions that have to do with their behaviors and their values. When you're in an interview, try to ask, what if I hired you and this happens in the business, what would you do? And if you have this kind of conflict with a coworker, what would you do? And so those kind of questions are useful, but still they can, people can also give you the best answer they think you want to hear, right? So it's important, for example, something that's very useful is to put them into challenge, or I don't know if the word is challenge, but for example, a business case, no, that you could give it to them, and ask them to present to you, and see them in action. That's the best thing. That's just, and Japanese culture says, hey, invite them to a tennis match, for example, or to have some activity outside of the formal interview so that you can see them in action, you can interact with them. I think that's very important because, for example, playing something with them, a sport, no, a tennis match, you can learn a lot about that person by how that person reacts when they lose a point or they win a point, or etc. So yeah, try to complement the interview with some other type of how you can experience a person, no, their real attitude, their real personality in other scenarios.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And for anybody listening to Albino, that is great advice. If you're interviewing people, I remember organizations I worked with, people I hired, tell them they're going to go to lunch and take a car ride, have them drive.
Yeah,
You get
yeah.
to see their car. Do they keep it clean or is it a toilet? When they drive, do they get road rage? When you get to the restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
someone, if it gets serious, especially for executive positions, invite their spouse. Because
Yeah.
if their home life's terrible, your performance at work is probably going to be terrible. So, Albino, I think you're spot on, man. That's great wisdom. And for our listeners, hopefully you can apply that to your life. So now you're married,
Mhm.
your business goes bankrupt, and you learned a hard lesson. Didn't even really do it. It wasn't like bad management of the business, it was employee related relations. Where do you go from there in your career and your life journey, Albino?
Well, actually, after that, I got I got married afterwards, and we.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said you were married during it.
No,
I
no,
apologize.
no. After that, sorry, I mentioned my wife, but she was my girlfriend at the time. But she
Oh, okay,
helped.
okay. Gotcha.
And after that, I got married, and we lived for a year in Madrid, where I was studying my master's degree. And when I came back, I worked for a consulting firm, and this was an amazing experience because I had the opportunity to work with management teams of large organizations, with CEOs and managers. And so I was this consulting firm, we were focused on strategy execution. And the framework that we used was balanced scorecard. We were representing Dr. David Norton and Robert Kaplan, who were the authors of this framework. And this framework was really, it was like the trend at the time. Everyone wanted to experience the balanced scorecard. And so I wasn't at the right time, the right moment where we were expanding. It was an amazing experience. I was learning a lot. We had different projects with different companies, like, for example, the Oil and Gas National Company in Mexico, which is Pemex. It's a huge company. That's the second largest company in Latin America. So I was working with them, and Grupo Modelo, which is the largest brewing company in Mexico. And so imagine the experience. And I also learned how to be a trainer. And here I want to share an anecdote here. It was also at the time was like somewhat of a failure, but that helped me afterwards, which that day I was the early days in the project with Grupo Modelo, is this brewing company, and I was appointed to give a training session to a group of. There were two groups: a group of managers and a group of directors, and we were two consultants. And the other consultant, my colleague, asked me, "Hey, which group would you want to take, the directors or the managers?" And this was my first training that I was going to deliver. No? I was not really prepared. It was my first one, and but I had this internal fire, and I say, "Hey, I'll take the directors one." Okay, all right, and I did that, and I think it was a mistake. I got really nervous throughout the training in the morning, and it was uncomfortable. Yeah, it was very noticeable. I was nervous. I was not fluent, and by the middle of the day, there was a complete day training. At the middle of the day, in the break, the the organizer talked to my boss, and she said, "Hey, we're going to switch the groups. We're going to put Albino in the manager's group because he's not doing a great job here." So we did that, and I did a better job there. But that day was a disaster. Actually, the organizer told the client told my boss, "I don't want Albino in the project anymore." And you know what happened? My boss said, "No, I'm not gonna let that happen. Albino's gonna stay, and he's gonna train more groups, and you're gonna see that he's really great." So that was amazing. And the client said, "Okay, let's see." And I continued the training and a lot of groups, and we were like 6 trainers, and we had these evaluations from our attendees, and I was the highest evaluated. No, I was the best trainer and in the project. So that was a great experience.
Let me ask you a question. Stop there, because even though in today's society, there's probably more leadership and management training than of all time in history, right? Before people learn from experience and through like watching someone doing it right. And now today, everybody reads books and takes seminars, but they're not a leader in the sense of actually getting it. They don't get it. So when you have an exceptional leader that says, no, he's going to keep going, or somebody loses $1 million contract, most of the time a manager or even executive will be like, "You're fired." When really it's like, "Okay, you just lost $1 million bucks, now go back and make me 2." There's a difference in the mentality of a great leader. What was your relationship like with that manager that kept you? Did he just see something in you? Did you know him? Had you worked with him for a long time? What do you know what it was that had him say, "No, we're keeping him and you're going to see the change"?
Well, I had been working with him for like 6 months, and we knew each other pretty well. We had this connection. He really knew me at a personal level because we're a similar type of personality, and I think we understood each other very, very well. That helped, and he believed in me. He believed in my potential. He saw that what I've been doing in those 6 months, and he knew that I was in a work in progress regarding training, and I was I was gonna overcome that situation. I was gonna be really good. He knew it, so that was key for me, that I had his support and that he really believed in me, and that would be my main advice here for leaders, that if your coworkers sense that you believe in them, that you trust them, and you see their potential, they're gonna do whatever it takes to get there. That's what happened to me, and I had that commitment because I knew that he was expecting high standards, and I already had those high standards, but I was a little insecure at the time. So that was key, having that support from my manager.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 major leadership lessons there. Number one, like Albino said, believe in your people and let them know it, right?
Yep. Yep.
But if you have an employee that you don't believe in, you're not doing a bad thing for any of you. Let them, find a new career, because if you don't believe in them, you're never going to fully support them, and they're never going to have their best performance. So would you agree or disagree with that?
Totally agree. I see a lot of managers that they tend to try to do everything themselves, and they don't delegate much. And that's because they don't trust their people. And they are not doing any good for them or for the team, because they are overwhelmed with work, and they are micromanaging their people. So if, as you were saying, if you don't trust your people, you need to do something about it. You need to work on your delegating skills and your perspective on people, and then you need to start, letting go and start trusting. And people are not perfect; they are going to make mistakes. You need to, be okay with that. And people are, I always recommend this book, the book Mindset. It's great because it talks about the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And we need to, fixed mindset is where you think that, everything is fixed, that you are a victim of the situation and there's nothing to do, the destiny is written. And the growth mindset is, hey, I can learn anything I want. I can improve in anything I want. I can achieve everything I want. So if you are in the growth mindset and you see your people as people that are improving, that you can, and your role is to help them grow. That's your role, right? And so obviously they're going to make mistakes, and you need to be okay with that. Yeah.
So where does your life go from there?
Okay. So this consulting job was really a great experience. And so I worked for many, many clients. And after that, I worked for a while with my dad again in another business, in a factory, a bread factory. They were this bread, like, this bread for sandwiches and hamburgers and all kind of packaged bread that you sell at supermarkets.
And what was his attitude towards you? Did he understand that my son did a great job and this guy took advantage of him in his, youthful nativity? Or was he like, I got to keep an eye on you? What was his relationship with you at that point?
He knew that I was young, and that was part of, my growth experience, and he never really got angry at me and what did you do. I think that that part I really appreciate, that he didn't get back on me for that. He understood that,
He
and
didn't
maybe
hold it against you, is what I was getting
no,
at. He knew
no,
that's a life lesson my son will always remember. I'm proud of
yeah,
him.
yeah, totally. And he always wanted me to work with him. And so, but I realized that I wasn't, and this was hard. I wasn't really being shaped or being developed by him, because he was, as I told you before, he was so hands off that I was like, on my own. And that happened again when I worked for this bread factory that he owned. And also I was there, many times later than the convenience store, but I was in charge of an organization with more than 100 employees, and I was in charge of that organization. And I worked there for 3 years, and this was a big challenge because I now I had that previous experience, and I didn't want to repeat that, but this was different. He had a good team there. He had an amazing production manager that I relied on him a lot, and so we did a very good team, and it was a great experience. And what I can say here is that what happened after that, after a few years later, my dad passed away, and the business, one of my brothers was in charge of the business, and the business started, having big problems until we had to close the business. And I had to sell the business. My idea was to sell the business, and I managed to do that. No? I managed to find someone interested, and we sold the business. But actually, we sold all the debts basically, so that they can keep the employees, and we get rid of the debts. So that was
Solvency, basically, instead of bankruptcy or solvency. You broke even and you walked away, or were you able to make some money?
No. We broke even and we walked away. Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't want my mom to to have that heritage of a business in bankruptcy and having to pay employees, etc. So what I managed to do is to sell the business, but basically, deliver the business to someone that could manage the business and take all the debts with it. And so that's it. So there's a story with that company, and so that by doing that, I protected my mother, right, so that she didn't have to deal with all those debts. Okay, and
actually, I have another question about that. You said you have two younger brothers?
Yes.
No sisters, just two younger brothers.
Yes.
Did they work for the same organization, or did they go off and do their own thing?
They worked for my dad, always, but I think that the main problem was that since my dad was not a leader that developed his people, they didn't grow much at those companies. They stayed like stable with what they were. And so I decided to leave my dad before he passed away. I talked to him, hey, I need to work for someone else. And so I worked, and that was a tough conversation with him. I invited him for a coffee, and hey, I'm sorry I need to leave. I know you want me to work with you, but I need to grow. I need to experience other things. I need to not be the son of the owner of the company, right? And he accepted that, and it was tough for him. He wanted me to stay, and so that was it. And I was brave enough to tell him that. And my brothers, I think they weren't brave enough, or maybe they were a little more comfortable there. And so I decided to go and look for a job. And then a headhunter contacted me, and I got a really great job at a large bus transportation company. And that was an amazing experience there. I got to create the strategic planning department for them, which it didn't exist at the moment. I was hired by the CEO. Actually, this was almost like 5 months assessment, all the interviews, and it was a pretty tough hiring process. And I got in, and I was really proud of that. And I was going to report to the CEO of the group. This is a company with more than 20,000 employees. And I was reporting to the CEO of the company. So it was an amazing achievement for me. And I was hired to manage strategic projects for the CEO. But when I shared with him what I did in the consultancy for other large organizations, where I helped them to define their objectives, their KPIs, their projects, etc., so that they could execute the strategy, he really liked that, and he said, "Hey, okay, why don't you do that here?" And they gave me the opportunity to create the strategy planning department. So that was a great experience, and I had another anecdote there, where I was there for 4 years, and I had to organize the annual strategic planning retreat, right? This offsite with all the directors, and there were 40 directors in a big room, and I was moderating the meeting. We're talking about the strategy, and this was a two-day event. And by the end of the first day, I started getting a panic attack. Because the previous 2 weeks, I skipped a lot of meals. I didn't have much sleep. I was really on a burnout, right? And I was feeling really bad at night. And someone took me to a hospital, and I was not able to be there by the second day. So I asked someone from my team to take over. And well, that was huge at the moment for me, because you know, being in the hospital, and the doctor said your heart was preparing for a heart attack. We can see that the cardiac enzymes in your blood. So that was a big call for me, and I realized that it wasn't worth it, right? To take it to the extreme that you risk your life, right, for a job, for your business, and that was so big lesson for me that from that moment I've been balancing my life, because I learned that you need to have priorities, and your priorities should be yourself. You need to take care of yourself, take care of your family, and then take care of your business. And I have that. All the other, at the moment, everything was about the business, and I didn't have time for myself, or for my family. So yeah, that was a big experience, and a learning experience.
And to get balance in life is, the biblical model. Like Old Testament, New Testament, God's always talking about balance. A just weight is good, a false balance is bad. For people out there, whether it's their personal life or their business, and most of them always intermesh together, what are some of the things you've learned? Like everybody's different, but what are some of the foundational things you've learned to balance your life, Albino?
Well, I learned that there's no such thing as I don't have time for that. We usually say that a lot, right? I don't have time for that. I don't have, and we usually don't have time for a hobby, or for something we enjoy doing, right? Or for pursuing a dream, maybe, because we're so busy with our short-term goals and, surviving many times, right? And that we, leave aside our dreams, right? And we leave aside our desires and our passions. And I don't read. For example, there's people that say, I would love to exercise daily, but I don't have time for that. I would love to read books. I don't have time. Okay, so first thing is there's no such thing. So one of my bosses, my previous bosses, said one time said, if you say you don't have time for that, that means that that's not important for you at the moment. Okay, so what are you investing your time in? That's what you're prioritizing. So first of all, you need to organize your priorities. Okay, and really going deep and put it on a scale. Right, what is it that is more important for you? What's the most important in your life? Right, and this is very transformational when you realize that you shouldn't be just reacting in life, reacting and surviving. You should be on top of things and planning for the future, and aiming for a bigger life, for a life where you are really satisfied, where you're really excited about what you're doing and who you are. So if you start thinking about that, then you're going to start changing your priorities. You're going to start seeing that, hey, if I don't really enjoy the moment with my family now, that my kids are at home, when they leave for college, when I don't see them, I'll see them just in Thanksgiving, I'm going to regret that, right? So I better enjoy them now, right? That's just one example. So what is it that you love most? And love them now, no? and spend time with them, and do your hobbies, and take care of yourself, right? And that's something I would recommend, to really make an exercise of introspection and ask yourself, what are my priorities? What do I want to achieve in life? What is most important for me in life? Now, be coherent with that, be congruent, and invest your time according to those priorities. And your life is going to be much more enjoyable.
I agree completely. And, you have God and yourself and your family and your friends, and everything else is just icing on the cake. So I think that's spot on advice. Thank you, Albino.
You're welcome. And there's always time for everything, right? I learned that as well. You need to be efficient and focused when you are on one thing, okay? And try to leverage your time. Try to get some advice from experts. Try to get some help from maybe a virtual assistant. Figure the way to be more efficient with your time, but to fill your life with much more things that you really love and you're passionate about. Don't don't cancel because thinking that you don't have time for that. Don't cancel those things. Bring them into your life and figure out you're going to do a lot of things. You're going to be much more happy.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. A friend of mine and their son, we were walking into a grocery store, and somehow we just got on the topic of would you rather have $100 or an hour? What's more important? And they're like, $100. I'm like, okay. I said, can you make another $100? They're like, yeah. I'm like, can you buy stuff that's worth $100 an hour later? They're like, yeah. I'm like, can you get that hour back? And they're like, no. I'm like, so what's more important? And they're like, oh, because we can make more money, we can even make more friends, but we can't make more time. So I think that's a huge lesson for me, for you, for all of our listeners out there. If you're listening to Albino, pay attention to your priorities because everybody's given 24 hours. And there's some people who are hyper productive with those 24 hours. So we can't say they have an advantage of time, right? It's how they're using it. So are there any things you learned, Albino, that help you use time more wisely?
Yes. I realized that whenever I'm connected to my priorities, to my purpose, to you know, my calling, which I've done a lot of work on that. And so that's how I started making some shifts in my career when I started asking myself these questions. Hey, how can I, be connected to my purpose and be more passionate about what I'm doing? So let me just share how I got into this. And, after the years, after this work experience, this burnout experience, I I worked for another company, and well, I talked to some of my previous clients in the consulting firm, the ones that I served like 5 years before, and and I asked them, hey, how are you doing with the project that I implemented with you, and how are things going with the strategy and the execution? And they told me, oh, that's something on the past. We're not using that anymore. And I was shocked, right? There was at the moment there was so much effort, so much investment of time and money in those big projects of strategy planning, etc. And many times, when the consultants leave, the project starts like dying, or and that happens. And I realized that happens in some other companies that didn't happen. So I asked myself, what's the difference? Why in some companies this prevailed, and in many others it didn't prevail? And the big difference was the leader, the kind of leader those organizations had. So the organizations that really embraced this framework and really, for example, this transportation company, when I was with them, I asked the CEO, hey, we need to set a goal that's a long-term goal that's going to drive the company to a big growth. And this CEO said, okay, we're going to double the size of the company in revenue in 10 years. This huge company. So that was, wow, amazing.
Yeah, and if anybody's listening and they haven't worked to that scale, doubling the size of any company in 10 years, unless it's a new startup, that's very impressive. But to take a large company and to exponentially grow revenue, that's aggressive growth.
So that's an example of a leader that, and this leader, he believed in his people, his team. He was a people-centered leader. and the company was a customer-oriented organization. So that's the kind of leaders I learned, that with those kind of leaders, those organizations have much more, potential for growth. And actually, this company achieved the goal. They not in year 10, but in year 9, they achieved the goal of doubling the size. So that was, wow, amazing. And I'm saying all this because I realized that to help organizations achieve their vision, we need to work with their leaders. No? The organizations need to have, and I'm not talking just about the CEO. All people that manage teams, they are all leaders. And there's another book that also was a breakthrough for me. The book is called First Break All the Rules. The author is Marcus Buckingham. And this book says people join organizations because of the company, because of the organization, the vision, but they leave the company because of the bosses, no? Because many times the bosses are not good leaders. So we need to work with leadership so that we can really help organizations achieve their vision. That was my big breakthrough. And that breakthrough made me understand that my next step was to become an executive coach. And I became a coach. I got certified 9 years ago, and I'm now dedicated to transform lives. And I can proudly say that I'm achieving that goal, that calling, or that purpose. And it's really satisfying to see the transformation in executives, that sometimes they feel stuck, or they feel overwhelmed, and I help them to really see through their short-term obstacles and see things from a different perspective, get empowered, improve their leadership, and really get to another level of performance. So that's something I'm doing right now. I'm really enjoying it, and I wanted to share this, how I got into this realization, this breakthrough, and now I'm doing something that it's really connected to me. I love helping people be better professionals, better human beings, but first of all, to believe in themselves. Like that manager that believed in me. I think the person that needs to believe in yourself is actually yourself. That's where we need to start with, right? And we need to take care of ourselves. We need to have a growth mindset, and we need to improve our leadership skills so that we can, scale, right, in business. And yeah, those are the steps I've been following, and now I'm doing exactly what I was called or meant, what I'm meant to do, which is helping people achieve their most important goals. And so that's one example of how and this is something I share in my book. I'm a co-author of a book. This book, the name of the book is Cracking the Rich Code. I'm a co-author we are 20 co-authors. Each one of us wrote one chapter of the book. This book is a volume 11. This is a series of books. These books are in Amazon, Cracking the Rich Code. And I share in this chapter my journey, and my learnings. And throughout my journey, I realized that I have 3 passions. And one of my passions is helping executives achieve their goals and organizations achieve their vision. Okay, so that's why I started one of my companies, which is we do executive coaching and consulting. Okay, so with this company, I'm fulfilling this passion. Okay, I also realized I have another passion, which is in sports. When at a young age, I haven't shared it before today, but I mentioned that I was pretty lonely in my early years, and I canalized this loneliness into a healthy habit, which was becoming a great athlete. Okay, and I trained a lot. my dad encouraged me. He helped me with coaches, etc., and I became a great water skier. I even won 2 national tournaments in Mexico when I was 15 years old. So that was an amazing experience. I learned a lot about discipline, and then I became really good at another sport. It's a racket sport called paddle, and that's becoming my one of my businesses right now, which is in sports. I'm going to bring to the U.S. this racket sport called paddle. Okay, this is a combination of squash and tennis. And my third business is also on one of my passions, which is education. I realized that through my middle school, high school, and college schooling, I I was not really engaged, right? I was not connected with my passion. I was not receiving, the the wisdom and the tools for real life, right? And I had to work a lot to gain that through coaches I hired, through therapists, through books. So I built myself, right? But what if we can save 20 years of that or 10 years and give that to kids, right? To give them leadership skills, selling skills, teach them about business, about entrepreneurship at a young age in college. So that's my third business. I want to give that to kids, to young people, so that they can take their future in their own hands, regardless of their upbringing, regardless of their environment or their financial situation or social situation. So those are the three businesses I'm starting from a year and a half ago, and I'm thrilled because I'm doing exactly what I'm passionate about, and I don't tell myself I don't have time for so many things. I have a family. I can't do three business. I tell myself, hey, I'm doing what I'm called to be, whom I'm called to be, what I'm called to do, and I've been partnered with experts on each field, and I'm leveraging resources, and I'm up to now. I feel really satisfied with what I'm doing.
That's awesome. So if
Mm.
someone wants to get a hold of you, Albino, whether, they're in Mexico, the United States, Australia, if they're in Egypt, what's the best way for people to reach you and continue the conversation?
Sure. The best way is through LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is linkedin.com/IN/Albino Sanchez. Albino is ALBINO Sanchez.
And we'll put a link to that in the show notes. So if you want to get a hold of Albino, continue the conversation, see more about what he's doing, check out that LinkedIn, check out his website. What's your website, Albino?
Is AHA Impact, AHA Impact.com.
Very nice. Very nice. So thank you for your time today and for helping us just walk through not just your life, but the aspects that apply to us and how we can be better humans and leaders and have a more fulfilled life. Before we go, are there any other thoughts or anything we missed that you want to cover before we end this episode?
Well, just to say that I encourage your listeners to listen to their calling, to their heart, to try to get in deep and write down what are my priorities, what is it that I want for my life, why I'm here, right? Because it's a miracle that we exist, that we live, right? There's a reason, right? Try to find that reason and try to connect yourself with that purpose, with that vision of your life, and try to make each day count and live in the present moment. Enjoy everything that you love and connect yourself with your passions and your purpose. That would be my advice.
That's great advice. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Oh, Bino, thank you for being here today, my friend.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Oh, anytime. And like our slogan says, ladies and gentlemen, don't just listen to great content. Do it. Repeat what you need to each day. Stay consistent. so you can have a great life in this world, but more importantly, in eternity to come. So take what Albino taught you, continue the conversation, share it with your friends and family, and let us know how we can help. And let us know about your successes, right? We want to hear about you thrive. It encourages us. So I'm David Pasqualone. This was our remarkable friend, Albino Sanchez. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next episode. Ciao.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat for life. The Remarkable People Podcast.